action. And as long as that's happening, then I think there will be really interesting things to build, will be a part of changing the world, and that's really exciting. And I think as long as that's happening, I'll be running the company. And I think who knows, like over the very long period of time, but I think a model that's worked really well for these technology companies is they're very product-centric, right? So there was this classic model of, okay, like bring in someone who's good at running companies and have the person who builds the products go build products. But I think so much of building companies now is building a product, right? That it's almost everything flows from the product and the marketing around that and the technology, that's really what you want to build your company around, right? So now I think more recently a lot of the companies that have been most successful are really run by their founders.
There's a lot of talk about Facebook and will it go public at some point. Would you feel comfortable running a public company?
I mean, sure, it's probably not that different. I'll leave that.
I know you've spent some time and talked to other technology entrepreneurs and CEOs.
Actually, I'm sure it's a lot different.
Yeah, I think it's a lot different. You can be like Microsoft.
I can pretend
you can put the CFO on the call with the investors on the quarterly call, right?
Oh, no, absolutely.
And speaking of Microsoft, I mean, Bill Gates, for example, is somebody I think you've spent some time with. What have you learned from people like Bill Gates? Who are your mentors, and what are they teaching you?
One of the people that I looked up to from very early on when I was building Facebook is Don Graham, and recently he joined our board. So that was awesome. But the perspective that I got from him that was really valuable was just to focus on the long term, right? I feel like a lot of the time, because technology moves very quickly, but I think especially in Silicon Valley, a lot of people are very short-term, hits-focused, right? And a lot of the questions are around, it's like, okay, so you build something, how do you scale it up and sell it or go public? And
that might be a factor of public companies, too.
Well, that never really resonated with me as the type of thing that I wanted to do, but it was, I'm sure that there are a lot of people in the Valley who share our perspective on wanting to build things for the long term. But early on, one of the people who I found who had that perspective was Don, and I think a lot of that is because his family has run this company for a long time, so he has to have a long-term perspective. And interestingly, going back to the question about going public, one of the things that we talk about is being able to maintain a long-term perspective. Being public, I think, has some challenges around that, which is why we're in no rush to do that. But I think just having that perspective of trying to build things not for 6 months out or a year out, but instead 5 or 10 years out I think it's really valuable, right? It's the thing that allows us to focus on building value for our partners and our users, and building a really quality service at the expense of trying to maximize revenue or profits in the short term. And we get a lot of questions for that. A lot of people are like, you don't care about money. It's like, no. I think we take a very rational view towards this, which is that you need to build a great business in order to attract great people. You attract great people, you're able to build a great business by serving people in the long term. If we are able to build products that attract hundreds of millions of users and millions of marketers and millions of developers, then we're going to have a great business, right? I don't know exactly how big it's going to be, but it's going to be good. And I think that the question is, over the long term, what's the best way to get there? And focusing on the quality for people now, I think, is probably the best way to do it. So Don has been a really good mentor and influence for me towards that.
You have a room here today full of global marketers and agencies. What do you want to charge this audience with over the next year or two? What would you like to see them do with Facebook?
Well, the dialogue that I think that a lot of us have is really good, but I think I think that there's this very clear direction that the world is going in towards more engagement directly between people in companies, people in governments, all these different groups. And all the products are just getting better and more personalized and are getting built in a social way. And I think that to the extent that we can all work together to build great products around that, we're not going to be able to do it without your help. We learn from all the things that we do working with you guys. But to the extent that we can push that forward quickly, I think we're going to learn a lot more quickly, and we're going to get to this great end state where this works a lot better for you guys and for us.
Do you think you'll reach 1 billion users by the end of the year?
No.
Not by the end of the year.
No chance.
When do you think you'll get there? Do you think you can get there?
I don't know. I mean, you started off asking about a question of 10-year trends.
Yeah.
One thing is, I think a lot of times it's a lot easier to predict broad trends over a 5 or 10-year period than it is to predict what will happen in a 1, 2, or even 3-year period.
Why is that?
Because there's all these macro changes that like dominate whatever micro things that you're doing are over a shorter period of time. So I mean, our growth hasn't been a straight line up, right? I mean, we've gone through periods where we haven't grown very much, and periods where the growth has been exponential, a few percent a week, right? And what's interesting, it kind of tips in different countries at different points, and that growth it's just pretty interesting to watch. But it's very hard to predict how many people we're going to have at the end of this year, at the end of next year. And it's one of the fun parts about running this company, and one of the challenging things is the biggest swings in kind of budgeting and building and operationalizing the company are how many people you're going to be serving. And I mean, last year, for example, we started the year at, it was 150 million people. And we didn't know if we were going to end the year at 200 or 250 or 400. And I mean, if we went from 150 to 200 million, I mean, maybe that would have been disappointing for some people, but adding 50 million people in my book is pretty good. So, like...
I think most people here would take it, actually.
So, I mean, and it was tough, and we were in the middle of this big recession, so we weren't sure what the revenue was going to be either, and we ended up the year with 350 million people. So, the team that had the job of building out the data centers last year had a very hard job, but I mean, that's fun, right?
Right.
I mean, so predicting this stuff over the short term, I think, is fairly challenging. Predicting over the longer term, I mean, again, like, I think if we succeed, we have a good chance of being the company that brings this to 1 billion people, but it's not a layup, right? I mean, not by any means, right? I mean, there's going to have to be so many things that happen between now and then that I think it's almost a guarantee that it happens. How it happens, I think we'll have to see, and it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, to see how it plays out.
Yeah. I think of, there's some of these services in places like China as well, places where maybe Facebook isn't big or at all, that, do you see a threat from any of those emerging countries?
Well, so our growth has been, we focused on just very organic growth, right? Letting the site grow wherever it happened to spread. So, okay, so 1 month it's Turkey, the next month it's India, and that was cool, right? And we did generally a very small set of things to aid growth in those countries. And now we're really down to 4 countries that we aren't the leading social network in. And it's Japan, Russia, China, and Korea. And we're focused, so now for the first time we're focused on doing some specific things in specific countries. But one of the things that we've gotten pretty good at is the analytics on measuring how things spread. It's a really important thing for us to do, both for us and in addition for our developers and marketers. And one of the really interesting trends to watch in a country is the way that a lot of these countries get started is people travel to a country from a country that everyone uses Facebook in, right? So you might go from the UK to Japan, right? And then you'll be there for a few months, or maybe you're just there for a week working. And you'll meet people and you'll encourage them and they'll get on Facebook. And then you go through this phase where at the beginning of a country's development, all of the people who are signing up in that country are mostly making connections to people outside the country. And when we know that a country is tipped and that it's about to, and that Facebook is going to grow very quickly, is when the local-to-local connections end up outnumbering the local-to-foreign connections. And we're very close to that. In a lot of these places. And so, so in Russia, I think where we just passed 1 million users, I think we have only 1 million folks in Japan and Korea, but we're close to it. I think in places like Russia, it's doubling every 6 months. So again, it's a long-term thing, right? I mean, we're not going to win in 6 months. We're probably not going to win in a year. But if that trend continues and the analytics that we've had in the past continue to hold true, then I think things are looking really promising for 3 to 5 years out.
Well, that's great. We will leave it there because we are out of time. In fact, I think we went a little over. Please help me thank Mark Zuckerberg.